is New York Real. I'm Olive.
Hi, I'm Rebekah.
Woo! My guest is Rebekah Morin. I have known her because I was in the immersive theater space. I met a lot of inspiring people and I've taken workshops. Last summer I did the summer intensive with Third Rail Projects, and wow, we had such a wonderful 3 days.
3 days, three densely
With a
packed
group
days.
that just redefining everything around us and learning how to create immersive pieces and perform. And I just took a workshop with you about shaping time.
Yes.
So welcome to New York Real. I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You are magical.
Oh, thank you.
I think if you can manage shaping time and space, and you know people's psychology, you're a mover, you pretty much have everything in control. As a performer, what is fun for you?
That's a great question.
What's worth investing?
What's worth investing in? So I started performing as a dancer. I've been a dancer all my life, and in the last 10 years, I would say, gotten into immersive theater, interactive theater, site-specific, sort of expanded my range of, I talk, for instance, now when I perform. It's not something I used to do at all. Dancing was something that was difficult to articulate, because dancing is a physical art form, and so how do I describe in words what my experience is as a mover, and the only way I knew how to do that was to perform, right? So to show the thing, right? To demonstrate
movement.
with your body, yeah.
And with stillness.
And with stillness, which is so important in time. What I discovered, I suppose, as a dancer, what became of most interesting to me became a lot about interaction. I don't think I made this choice, but at some point I looked back and realized the people I was working with here in New York City and like the kind of work I was pursuing, most of the movement was about touch and weight sharing, and I realized I worked with Jody Oberfelder for about 10 years. All of her choreography is weight sharing. I think I almost never wasn't touching someone, or we often hold each other up. So something about that interaction between people and how the non-verbal communication of it was what kept me interested. And now, with interactive theater, to be able to bring that relationship to the audience, to someone who doesn't know maybe what's going to happen. You know, it's one thing for me to be in a studio with you and say, let's try this lift here, put your foot here, and I'm gonna, and we have an agreement about what's going to happen before we do it. But when I have an audience, you know, we don't quite have that same relationship.
And they are expecting, but also don't know what they're expecting.
Yes.
And every touch is like, if you do touch the audience.
It can be so different for each person. As a performer, I'm not worried that I will fall into a habit and like check out mentally or emotionally, because I don't know what you're going to do. So
the other way would be to rehearse the exact same piece and do it with the exact same audience. I mean, exact same scene partners, and the audience is the fourth wall outside.
Yes.
Watching you.
Yes. More traditional theater. The only you don't have the interaction with the audience. In fact, you may not even see them if you're on a proscenium stage.
Because the spotlight's on you.
Although I was lucky to be brought up in modern dance where those boundaries were already being broken. For instance, in the 70s, the Judson Church movement was about pedestrian movement and about being close to your audience without theatrical lighting. And these shows still happen at Judson Church, which is this big, it's open, it's not contained in the way a theater is. It's very often people in rehearsal clothes. And so the joy of watching that is that you're watching humans, maybe, right? They're right close to you, and so there was already that sort of sense of wanting to be close to the audience, wanting to be humans with them.
I like that. So is that instant connection, interaction, and you have to react, and you have to guide. And at the same time, there is a story.
There is. Sometimes, yes. I suppose I'll talk about Then She Fell, because
Yes, please.
this is, so...
You're currently playing the Red Queen.
Currently playing the Red Queen.
Share some moments that are memorable for you, whether you're interacting with your cast or audience members, or yourself, self-discovery.
Yes, well, thank you for mentioning all three of those things, because they all exist at the same time.
Right.
And they're all interesting to me. They're all different. So, like, to start backwards, I created the role of Red Queen with in collaboration with the company in the container of this show. 6.5 years ago,
Okay.
Or at least this version of her. And much of that material has remained relatively unchanged. Like, little things changed, but relatively the same for a period of time. So,
when you first got did Zach write it? When you first got the story, what happened? What's the first thing that you guys do?
Well, the very, very
to give it life?
first thing. The very first thing I ever did at a Third Row Projects rehearsal for these characters was I was given 2 easy chairs and told, these are your chairs, these are your props. Find out all the things you can do on them. So we often begin from a physical level. And that was just about finding possibility. Obviously, you can sit in a chair. Can I sit on one arm? Can I lie across both arms? Can I pick them up? Can I stack them? Can I get underneath them? Can I ask someone else to sit? Like, you just kind of laundry list of everything that's possible with them. So we do often build our characters from a physical point of view. We look at the spaces they inhabit, which are not necessarily pre-existing, but the design elements and the writing of text, the choreography, all kind of happens simultaneously for this show. It was like we almost needed to, it's like, well, we can't make movement until we understand the space, right? Because we do make movement on architecture. So is there a chair? Is there a windowsill? How high are my walls? What can I climb on is usually the first question I ask anybody. But can I climb on it?
And when you rehearse, you're probably not at the final performance space.
Not always.
You brought the show
no.
to multiple places, right?
This show, Then She Fell, lives where it is.
Okay.
We
Kingston
created
was.
some movement with rehearsal props, but once it landed, and in fact it landed in its original space for, I want to say we had almost 2 months before we opened to be in the space, because it is such a player and a character. It would have just not at all been the same show if we hadn't let the space tell us where to go.
With the stairs, using the outside, the stairs, and inside, and up and down, and timing. Wow.
Yeah.
So what are the memorable moments?
Audience interaction, memorable moments. Well, I suppose like some of the most memorable ones are often the ones where like something goes wrong, right? Where like...
So to give the audience down here with us a little bit of backstory, right, for this camera.
Oh, okay. Professional camera.
Then She Fell is an interactive performance piece. We often throw around the word immersive,
Yes.
but I will let you use it when it's appropriate.
Well, I think there's a difference between immersive and interactive, and they could be one or both or not, yeah. And this is definitely an interactive show in the sense that the players all speak with the audience and expect response.
Yes, and there are a lot of intimate scenes And even though we are free to, the audience is free to move around, you are guided. You know that there is somewhere to go. There's a next chapter. And the story is about the author who wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
And
yeah, so one thing I enjoy about this show is that so the characters are people and creatures that many people are familiar with and have feelings about, right? So this is a wonderful hook for the audience because they already feel identified.
Yes, they
with
think
you.
they grew up with it.
Yeah, they want to know you, right?
The time I attended, there was a girl who dressed up.
Yes, people dress up.
In costume as Alice, and I thought she was a performer, but she was in the audience with us, and it was like, wait, who is not? But we don't know, we're just going to enjoy it.
And that's definitely a thing that's come up in terms of, you mentioned like the difference between immersive and interactive. As these forms of theater become more popular, there's so much overlap, right? Because certainly part of our audience are people who are interested in live action role play, which is not quite what this show is. We interact with you, but we don't think you're a character. Right, which is different. So what we expect of the audio, we talk about audience expectations. The phenomenon of escape rooms. I see some folks who will, like, if that's where you're coming from as the audience, then there's a certain drive to like solve a mystery, which also doesn't exist at this show. I mean, there's no answer.
Don't tear the carpet.
Please don't tear my carpets up. There's no, although I was joking to people, it's like, you can't, it's a show, you can't win, you can't level up but we could make that show. Why don't, sure we could. Of course we could. We could hide something under a carpet, and if someone found the magic key, we would have to pull out that scene that we only rehearsed 2 months ago because no one found the key, or it's all possible, right?
Some secret to be unlocked.
We don't do that. Please don't tear my carpet up. But I would actually love to make that show. I guess what I'm saying is that observing the desires of different audience groups has really fueled my creative juices. So why can't I give those people what they want? If they want a secret scene, I bet I could make that. Let's figure out what the logistics of that are, theatrically and timing-wise, shaping time and space. How do you let people have their own experience, but still keep the story? And I think this show is a very it's a very nice container. You will get the story. You won't be left on your own. And the performers will in fact guide you from scene to scene. But the way they do that, I think, is what makes the interaction personal and exciting. Because if you're someone as an audience who is very excited and wants to touch things in the room and participate with me and talk to me, I'll do that with you. But if you're someone who is really wants to have their seat and be a viewer, that's also totally fine. I can, however much, and it's not even about less or more. I'm trying to sort of avoid that comparison. It's
describing more with the group scenes or the one-on-one scenes. I was very surprised when I was in a room with one performer and I'm like, you are doing this just for me? And what am I going to do to you right now?
Yes, right? Everyone has a different, so some people may feel a pressure that, oh no, I'm the only person they're performing for, and maybe they think I expect something of them. But it is very special. And it actually reminds me a bit of teaching, where if I had a group workshop, you would be less able to customize an exercise or a discussion for each person. But when we have a one-on-one scene, the scene remains the same. Perhaps I need you to help me put a letter together or something.
We always ask for help.
Yeah, well,
in a scene.
Yes. And I actually pointed that out this morning. I had a group of first-year theater students. So we talked about the basics of interaction. And they sort of discovered this on their own, that one of the best ways to engage someone is to ask for their help. Because people enjoy that, right? They want to be helpful. They want to feel necessary.
If you're being asked, you know that you have the other person's consent to participate.
Yes, that's also a really good point, because consent is hugely important in this work, and it's something that we're trying to have a discussion about as a culture right now.
Totally.
Try it. So, I mean, we talked about touch. You know, that's something, if you're using non-verbal communication, how do you get consent to touch someone in a interactive space like this? I mean, I actually use my eye contact first, and I would look at the place I would touch. And I've seen people react already. Sometimes folks be like just that much. If I'm shifting my gaze to your shoulder, I've seen people back their shoulder up at that amount of pressure, as it were, or not. They'll look where you're looking, and then if I see that I can do that, I would probably lift a hand. So something's, I mean, this is all very like broken down step by step, right? Which is also
but it happens in a split second.
It happens in a split second. So you have to be like, may I? Oh,
without saying it.
Oh, yeah, and you get so much feedback from a body.
Might just like try to do the same to you.
They may, yes,
or hold your hand.
Or hold your hand. That's great. I love that. We talk a lot about hands are so informative. So informative. There's so much in this part of how we interact with the world. You know, we
they say in a classroom, if the teacher raises a hand, the class will quiet down, no matter how old they are.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's powerful, right? Because it's a palm. This gesture means something. You're also
something important.
It's changing the space, right? Your hand is now above your head and above the rest of the class, so it brings attention to it.
Let's go back to your childhood for a second.
Okay. That was pretty nice.
Where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born and raised in the middle of Massachusetts, in a very small town. So, although I was fortunate to begin dance classes as a young child, so even though I didn't have big city access, I had a good teacher. I started ballet class when I was 4 years old because my doctor said I have a little bit of scoliosis. And she said, best just to go to dance class, let her muscles, develop, and this way maybe you won't have to wear a brace or something like this later, which turned out to be great. I mean,
and then a little bit of scoliosis too.
Yeah, and moving, any kind of movement is good for it. And then in that way that's how I started dancing, and I never really stopped. A nice community there. It was Started with ballet and tap and jazz, like you do. Sort of a traditional cocktail there. Although when I was about 10 years old, the older students at our studio started getting modern dance class. They were doing some Humphrey and Lamone and some Graham technique. Not that I knew those words, but what I knew was that they got to slide on the floor. And we were like, we want to do the kind of dancing. We sort of ganged up on my dance teacher. And we're like, we want to do modern dance. We want to do that. She was like, all right. So I think that's a lot younger than a lot of people get those classes in this culture for whatever reason, because who doesn't want to slide on the floor?
It reminded me, I've seen a video of you, when I was thinking today whether we should sit on the floor or find some space, I've seen a video of you on the floor talking. I'm like, she's fine. She can be on any dimension. And you have, I've also seen a recorded piece, Dance Horror, with you in a bathroom.
Yes, I love that.
Whoa, you are sideways. It's like you can fly. Do you imagine, like, when you were young, that, say that's the floor, how are you gonna get up
I think
here?
I was a climber. No, in fact, I know I was a climber. My mother, and this is not something I remember because I was a very little child. She talks about. She's, I only left you alone for a moment, and there I was on top of the bookshelf, at like 18 months old or something. So yeah, I guess I am a climber, a climber and a toucher of things, and perhaps that I can probably give credit to growing up in the woods, in the out of doors.
You climb trees.
You climb trees. You climb trees. You throw rocks. You roll in the dirt. So I was a very tactile child.
Oh, the texture of nature. Do you have siblings?
I do. Yeah, she's not so into nature as I am.
What did
so
you
I guess
play?
It's not.
What did you like to play when you were a kid?
I mean, I played outside a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes the sort of building things, forts out of branches, or make a special little hiding places, or I liked to, and I suppose storytelling too. I suppose there was an element of storytelling in all of that, right? I mean, I was definitely the right age to be a huge Star Wars fan as a little kid, and so the oak tree grove became the Ewok forest, and I had all the little planets laid out. A lot of playing pretend outside.
I'm so glad we're doing this outside.
World creation, like we do. Yeah.
So from then on, you pretty much experimented with all types of dance. And were you into theater as well?
No, not at all. I did not have theater in school growing up, so I didn't have an exposure to it. Although, when I was very young, there were parents of friends of mine who felt it was important for us to have that sort of influence in our life, and I can't believe I almost forgot about this. They actually formed a little theater troupe of us youngins. We were, again, oh God, how old were we? We started when we were 8 or 9, maybe, quite little, and probably ended in junior high once we all got into our own activities. But we would go to the local nursing homes and sing songs and recite poetry and put on little plays, and it's just very much that sort of a trunk full of props. And so I put on this hat and I'm this person, I put on this hat, I'm that person. So, yes, in spite of the fact that it wasn't in my formal education, I did have the building blocks of theater, given to me by just the people in my world. So there was a period in the high school and college when I didn't do theater, as it were, but I guess it I had some of that in my back pocket.
Do you remember the transition when you were used to performing with movements, dance, and all of a sudden you get to open your mouth and use words?
It was the worst. I try to remember the first time. I mean, well, there was a little bit of language use in my modern dance education, but the way there was such a sort of strange and particular way that modern dancers often use language, and I'm not sure if I can demonstrate this properly.
It's for this camera.
But it's never in a conversational tone, at least my first exposure to words was not about exposition or giving lines.
Okay.
It was more about using sound, the way we use movement. So I recall a piece that my college roommate made where we were using words, but they were sort of chunked into nonsense phrases and repeated, so it made more like a sound score.
Okay.
Right, so I was still comfortable with that because I wasn't trying to communicate an idea with words yet. Right, it wasn't
a part of the ritual, the dance.
Yes, I remember it was something about work. What I remember of it was this movement came from I'm swiping groceries across the scanner. and someone behind me had this whole like beep score they were saying.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was like beep, boo, whip, boo, whip. And you put that together, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, I get what she's doing now, you know, or whatever that was. So it was more about sound, right, than words. The first time I ever really worked with words was actually not in a performance setting, really. I think this is true. But I went to yoga school in 2002, and it didn't really hit me until about halfway through that very intensive fall that teaching meant speaking in public. And by then it was too late. I had signed up for the thing. And yoga was very helpful to me because I think it also started with sound, right? The practice of chanting is not, you don't have to hit a note. You don't have to say words. It was just about the physicalization of sound.
Like the vibration
Yeah.
of the movement.
Yeah, so I could connect to that as a mover.
But there is a lot of instructions.
A lot.
And a lot of people close their eyes and just listen.
Yes, and my teachers were very smart. I went to the Laughing Lotus. They're amazing, and they knew me well enough. They knew I was a dancer. That when it came time for us to begin practicing, like, say, teaching a sequence, like a sun salutation, they said, okay, now, Rebekah, you go up there and you stand still and hold your hands behind your back and tell me in words what to do, because I know you can show me what it is. And that was, I mean, honestly, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do as a student. I didn't do it. The first time I tried, I couldn't do it.
So how would you describe it now?
Now, I mean, I feel much better about it now. I wish I had some better advice about like what that transition was like from like complete utter fear and the inability to make a sound to now being quite comfortable with words. I think it just
Isn't it a little bit about carving that edge again?
yes, because like so now I'm making sound but I'm not talking. Now I'm talking but I'm not talking to you. Right, yes. It is about about carving that edge out. And I like teaching yoga did give me a space where the words were so functional. At least when I began, I talked about anatomy a lot. So I felt like I was saying facts. I guess that was helpful, right? I'm not trying to convince you of something. I'm not telling you a story. I'm not trying to, affect how you feel about something. I'm saying put your hip socket over your heel because this will be better for your leg muscles. I'm sure about that, so I can say it, right? And then when it gets to saying lines or being a character, so I'm thinking now about the Red Queen and learning. She has a very powerful monologue, and so how do I? It's like how do those words become yours, become true? Yeah. How can I relate to those words in the same way I'm absolutely sure that it's better for your knee joint when you move straight over the center of your second toe? How can I be that sure about what this character is saying? Part of it's repetition, right? Like anything else, like we were talking about just doing a dance step over and over again. And I know, because I know some actors now, like real ones that trained as actors. And of course you have to say your lines thousands of times. And you say them in different voices. You say them in a way you would never say them as that character. That's what I learned from actors. Is repetition and comfort, and like don't try to build the final product, which in a way I guess I knew as a dancer, because here, take these chairs, find out all the things you can do with them, became here, take these words and find out all the ways you can say them.
Talking to you, I feel like I'm not usually moving that much in an interview. But I feel like I'm mirroring you sometimes.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm really feeling how it's 360 degrees, inside and out. Because there's this layer of you as the performer, as the partner, scene partner, and watching the audience and thinking what's next and telling the story. It's a real talent.
Thank you.
And it takes discipline.
Yeah, it's a lot about attention. How did this came? Oh, this came up for me. I was talking with another performer about one-on-ones.
Yeah.
And sustaining that attention. Like we're doing a show that happens repeatedly. So you're basically doing the same scene with a different person over and over and over and over again. And he was saying, he's like, I'm so tired. Because it's about attention.
Yeah.
You know, I know you've observed that about the workshops that Third Rail gives and how important that is to that company. It does, I guess, it takes the discipline and practice. But also, what a gift in this moment where we're like distracted, where our attention is distracted so often. I have a feeling that's one of the things that appeals to people as an audience, that why you would even want to go to interactive theater, is that it actually has both of those elements. You can be distracted because it's beautiful things to look at, right? And you can kind of look at the set or the thing that's happening, or
lots of details if you pay attention.
Details, yeah.
You can also soften your focus and just take everything in.
Yes.
And I remember we were told, I went to school for theater and art. Our acting teacher said at the time, before interactive theater, like, there's only one new art form, stand-up comedy, improv, that's it, nothing new. And they said, like, if you're doing theater, acting, you gotta really be it. When you're doing film, the camera can zoom in and get all the things in a close-up of your eyes. But I feel like it's not the same now with interactive.
No, it's this hybrid, isn't it? Because your audience is close to you. Maybe. Like they could have either perspective on you.
And it has to work even if they are seeing your head, the back of your head.
Yeah.
Hence this camera.
Yes. Well, I mean, and that is something we practice. Janine Willett, one of our other directors, I feel like she did something like that this summer in the intensive, where she was talking about, like, if I have something I want you to be interested in, sometimes it works to put your back to somebody and really, yeah, it's just a cigarette butt, but but if, you know, how much more intriguing and inviting was that than if I had been like, hey, look at that thing over there.
Then it will only be pointing and pointing.
Yeah.
That is so true. My aunt used to put makeup on from the mirror. My mom told me I was like, I wasn't speaking. So she did what you did, a turn. And as a toddler, I would fold in half just to see what's in the mirror. Reflection.
Yeah.
I thought you were playing with words. You were saying cigarette butt.
No, but it could be. But.
So we're talking about the question we don't like to answer.
What do you do? And
so what do you do for a living?
What do you do for a living? What do you do? Slash,
what
slash,
else
slash.
are you
And what
working
else are you working on? Yeah, slash. Like, I mean, yeah. Sometimes I approach that question facetiously and like actually try to list all the things I do for a living, and then people get really tired and bored right away because it's too long a list.
People don't believe me when I tell them I have like 19 projects and stuff.
Because some projects take a week, some projects takes 3 years.
Exactly.
You know, and some things you do for a moment. One of my first jobs in this city was bartending. I worked at 4 places in the course of 4 or 5 years. No, 5 5 places in 4 years. I don't remember. And then I didn't. I got a little bit more work dancing, but then I also started teaching yoga, and I was teaching kiddos after school, and then all of a sudden, and I just didn't happen to bartend. Then 14 years later, it like came up again, and I was like, oh yes, I know how to bartend. I am a bartender. Yes, I will do this. And you try to make the resume look like there wasn't a 14-year gap. Doesn't mean I don't know how to do it anymore, but like if I really went along and listed all those jobs, that's a piece, right? That's a show then. That's a performance piece. Like
We started talking about this because I said you're almost non-Googleable. Along with all of the our favorite teachers at the real project. Because you exist in real life. Like I think LinkedIn is really silly.
Yeah, I've never done a LinkedIn. I've gotten the emails. I can only do one thing at a time. I feel like social
I'm
media
on there,
wise.
but that doesn't represent me at all. It just lists all the jobs.
Lists all the jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I found like a bio here, a bio there, but the Rebekah that I knew, I learned from interacting with you. I learned about you working with horses through, the workshop, and we talk about the details, like all the things. I think we need to bring this back, like for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like not in a grand scale of doing something, making it a better world, or anything, but just ask ourselves, are we here?
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's obvious to point out smartphone technology and how you can go to a concert and see everyone holding their screen up to record
and watching through the screen.
That's what's confusing to me because I sort of grew up without it, so I don't get why that's fun.
Well, it's for later.
It's for later. And that's exactly what you're bringing up. They're not there now. They're making a thing for later or a thing to display for the public, right? So if you're taking a film, it's with the purpose of showing it to people online or otherwise, or looking at it later for yourself. But what are you remembering? Are you remembering the concert, or are you remembering making a recording?
They assume they get what it is. So
Yeah.
I like the song. Must be good. I mean, right now we are recording here.
True.
But right now, in this moment, I'm really interacting with you, and we talk about things, anything we want to talk about. And I think that is so precious.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That one-on-one just... And the free-flowing conversation, too, is something I think we don't place enough value on. People really like to have an agenda.
Yeah.
And actionable items and quantifiable progress. And sometimes I'm not sure how valuable those things are. I mean, they're valuable in a certain context.
It's not control. But then other things, when it comes, it's very stressful because you're not used to being thrown off book.
Yeah, well, great, right? Off book is exactly it, right? Are we trying to, like in life, are we trying to say our script, or are we improvising? It seems to me that you've sort of this idea of like, we're improvising.
Yes, like right now, like a lot of people would be like, "What is this interview? Like, what is this about?"
Where are the questions? What is the thesis? So what's your thesis statement? I remember a friend in school was like, just started, I'll write a thesis as a senior, and then was really interested in the research, and at some point realized he was not at all interested in making a thesis. It's like, good, then don't. Keep doing your research.
Well, I think we learned in school that we need to have that one phrase,
the product, the elevator pitch,
Yes.
the paper, whatever form it takes, right?
How does it work when you are trying to teach something that is so free, but you have to teach it? What is the curriculum? With dance, with yoga, theater?
I think something that helped me as a teacher was teaching, yoga and as a teenager even, I would teach dance to young students, but because the dance I was teaching was somewhat like ballet, tap, jazz, and the yoga, there are a series of movements, so it had something very clear, a sequence. But lately, doing workshops with third rail about these things that are kind of so subtle and difficult to talk about. I feel like my job as a teacher is to create a situation in which people can interact and hopefully discover the lesson. Rather than listening to me say a thing.
And I learned a lot from the shaping time workshop where we do the same thing, but you gave us 30 seconds to do that, and then 10 seconds,
yes,
and a minute.
Yes, that was so interesting for me. I had never tried that exact thing before.
In a minute, I was whoa! I got so much time to pay attention to the details, and with the 10 seconds, it was like hardly even finished. That says so much about living life. I think you are teaching people.
Oh gosh, thanks. But I'm glad you pointed out that exercise, because what I wanted out of that was that for you as students to have the experience that maybe an audience member would have, so that when you go then to design an experience for someone, you know exactly what it feels like to have not enough time. You know what it feels like to have too much time. And so you'll get to pick. Do I want to give this person an uncomfortably long amount of time? Do I want to make them hurry? You'll know how they feel in that moment.
Really, my task was to fold a paper airplane.
Yes.
And because you set the first round to be 30 seconds, so I'm thinking, yeah, got plenty time. But if the task was supposed to be only 10 seconds,
yeah,
I would approach it completely differently. And that's kind of like if we know we will live to 100 years old, I'll live life different. Right? Like people used to live to like 40s. Yes. 45 is like old age.
It's true. Yes, and you do. You take longer. We have longer childhoods now, right? I mean, and if you had
still in my childhood. That's why we say adulting sometimes.
Yes, we have new verbs now because we have.
Can we talk about horses for a second?
Oh yeah.
What did you do with horses?
It keeps coming up. The company is called the Equus Project /Onsite NYC for when they do human things in New York. The training I got was from the Pirelli School of Natural Horsemanship. And the reason we chose natural horsemanship is because it's less about riding technique and more about communication. So as a dancer, I'm not an accomplished rider. I'm polite enough to handle myself. But we wanted to be on our own feet and have non-human partners in our dance. And so it was all about body language and body language in terms of the very basics of it, like how close is this creature comfortable with me standing, right? And horses will be very, very clear about this shoulder thing. If you have an animal that's very high strung for whatever reason, and I looked at their shoulder, they would move, actually physically move away because gaze is pressure. And I think that human beings, we often, because we're trying to relate to each other, to be nice or accommodating, and sometimes that leads to an interaction that is less than truthful. Like maybe you'll let me touch you even if you don't really want me to, or you'll put up with it.
Well, we do so much to be polite.
Yes. And so I learned so much from working with animals that didn't have any of that.
The horse is like, don't touch me.
Yeah, don't touch me. Or they're very curious about you. So they would and you would have to be very clear about don't touch me, because they're bigger. Group behavior too. You know, you figure out which one is the leader, and if you can get that one to come with you, the rest will come, which absolutely works in groups of humans.
The influencers of horses.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, this horse eat at this restaurant. Let me go.
I'm gonna go over there. So I'll tell you a story that I didn't get to experience, but I love this story. It was this guy we were working with had a herd of Pasofino horses, which that particular breed is actually trained to, rather than walk and trot and canter, they just walk really fast. So they're a very smooth ride because they don't. Not that important to the story, but like these cute little walking horses, right? And they have a pecking order. There's a leader, you know, and there's and one day there was some work being done in the woods nearby, and one of the horses that was sort of lower in ranking was playing with the woodpile for whatever reason, was investigating the sticks, and kind of by accident, his human believes, he picked one up, and it was very big in his mouth, and all the other horses went, "Whoa! That one is huge!" suddenly, and he started bossing them around. He took his stick and he told them what to do, and they all, like, all of a sudden he gained rank.
With a prop.
With a prop. Well, it didn't take very long for the rest of the horses to start picking up sticks. So now they're learning, right? So now he's got this herd. He's like, all right, well, this has to end. So he had to get the sticks out of the pasture because they're all just like chasing each other with branches. So, yeah, but they're so, right. So they do all those things that we do of like trying to figure out who's in charge and where they fit within the group and how can they find a better spot within the group. So anyway, I learned a lot about group behavior and
engaging them.
And
I remember you said with horses, whatever you do, you can never be more interesting than poop.
Nope, you can't. Someone else's poop is always more interesting than you, human. So yes, humility. But I mean, what a great starter for then going into interactive theater, because I'm not insulted when, you know, I think I have this great scene to show you and you come into the room, but if you notice there are books on my shelf and you're that person who is just like, books, you're gonna go pick up a book and read it, or you're gonna, like, it's not, it's very important to remember that it's never about you as a performer. And honestly, as soon as you start like falling into that trap of wanting to be looked at, that's the worst. I mean, no one will be interested, right? Because when you like you're not interested in the person at the party who like follows you around and tries to tell you that your life story, and they're like, yeah, but keep listening to me. Wait, but keep listening to me, right? Like that's not interesting. It's such a turn off. Whereas you might notice someone, you probably would notice someone who is engaged in their own activity. That was something the students noticed this morning right away, that
yes.
They were in two groups, so they could have that experience of witnessing. They said, oh, it was like when I was inside of it, like you could see some of them like trying, like, oh, here, look at this, let's sit in this chair, and their partner would be like, eh. And so they would try again. No, but really sit in the chair. I don't want to sit in the chair that much.
Then the scene cannot begin.
Then the scene can't begin, right? So one of us like, okay, took the chair away and sat in it herself. Well, okay, now that chair becomes appealing.
And then as soon as she gets up, someone would want to sit.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch people make those discoveries, because I think we do, like you say, it is about human behavior. We do know how to do this. But we forget, or we get like deeply embedded in our own agenda. And you might miss that interaction, like maybe something feels like a challenge or, you know, a no to you, but maybe actually in that negotiation is something far more interesting than than your idea.
People do say no with all the subtext of yes, and vice versa.
Yeah, they do. Because we're complicated creatures. We talk a lot about awareness.
Yes.
Right? In terms of like self-awareness, awareness of the space around you, and so all of these things being heightened in interactive performance, but they are actually just the stuff of life, right?
Yes.
So for me, the way, like, and this is hopefully a very handy nuts and bolts recommendation, breathe. That's it. That's my one-word piece of advice. Breathe. Notice your breathing, because it brings you immediately into right now.
True.
It is the only way I have found for myself to immediately come back to now.
I'm here.
You're here. You're breathing. Notice if you're breathing in or out. You know, it doesn't have to be like profound. Am I inhaling or exhaling? And if the answer is neither, then that's also really good information. And you should try to do one or the other. So like that's how I handle myself. Like in terms of my energy, and if and it's how I handle difficult interactions.
We often hold our breaths off.
So often.
And like you said, even if the realization is that I am holding my breath,
So
it's already doing something.
yes, you've already changed it. So like bringing your attention to your breath actually does change it. It's this really magical place between our conscious and our unconscious. You can hold your breath if you want to. You can decide how to breathe, but you don't have to think about your breath all the time. It happens. So it's just a place that you have access to all the time.
Anytime, anywhere,
Anytime,
any situation.
anywhere, any
I love
situation.
it. Breathe.
Breathe. Now.
Breathe now. So, is it for existing in the world? Does it have to do with breathing?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think it comes back to awareness, right? That often when we encounter difficulty in the world, we've not noticed something, right? That our partner is not breathing, or they're getting tense, and we're gotta say what we gotta say, so we don't notice their body language has changed.
Not listening is a big thing for people.
Listening. I mean, that's another huge one-word piece of advice, right? Whether you're trying to make something creative or just live in the world. Listen. You learn so much. That's something I'm always relearning as a teacher and practicing as a teacher, is to stop talking.
Stop talking and breathe now.
Yeah. Advice.
That's actually really great advice.
Drink water.
Yes.
Tom told that story,
Yeah.
right? Wasn't that? Yes. No, that piece of advice one of my directors was given as a young dancer. What do I do? How do I? Drink more water.
Tom also says everything that you believe is true, the opposite is also true.
That's also very smart.
Okay, my last question is, what is one of your most favorite memory in New York City?
Ooh,
Since this is New York Real.
New York. Oh
New York.
my God.
I love New York more and more. Used to want to move to California, like every New Yorker thought about that. So much to discover.
There's so much here. There's so much. I feel some of the best things that happen here are like those unexpected. I mean, even the subway interactions we were talking about, and I'm trying to think of something very specific, but the thing that makes my heart burst, with love for this ridiculous place that sometimes we all really want to leave, it is watching people do all the things we've just talked about. Because New Yorkers, as a group, do this. We notice someone looking at a map.
Yeah.
And run over to them and say, "Hey, where you going? What are you doing? Are you, oh, you go now? Don't go down there. Go over here." You know. Or when like the groups of people coming together to do things are so powerful here. I've been to a few political marches here, and it's been one of the most inspiring moments to watch that many people come together for a cause and to be peaceful and to like join with each other. Usually you'll often find people making music or this kind of,
It's like a collaborative city.
Collaborative city. You find, I love watching subway performers get a crowd around them, and not just a watching crowd, participating crowd. So do that. Someone will be drumming on cans, and some stranger will come and dance with them. Right? Just because they want to dance.
Yeah. I feel like we dance in grocery stores when there's music.
Yes, and people sing to each other, right? If you notice, I think, I know this is not a New York exclusive experience, but maybe it's different here. Trader Joe's is one of those places that you have to be a community because, you're going to say, "Hold my basket while I go over here and get this butter," or "Can you get me one of those?" Or like the community building. New Yorkers builds community really easily. But I love them for it.
Thank you, Rebekah,
Thank you.
for being on here. And it really feels like we're just hanging out. And that's what I want to do actually with my channel. I want people to just watch it and like they're just with us here. Conversation. And that's what we talk about. We could go walk and lunch.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, because this does feel like the way that I would prefer to have an online presence, as it were, like in this format, rather than checking boxes and whatnot. So.
I don't have 10 questions for you. We just talk.
Perfect.
Thank you. I feel so honored to be able to talk to you and learn from you every time I see you. And I really appreciate you. Thank you. Yes, that's it!
All right.